I think I had some technical difficulties, and I'm hoping that everybody can hear me now and also see my screen. I'm going to just confirm that. Okay. So I had already given a little overview of what we are doing today, so sorry for the confusion. Today, just to preface ahead of time, we are doing this seminar for UK customers. However, any United States customers that are on the line are more than welcome to stay. But just to let you know ahead of time, there is some functionality available in the UK that we do not use in the United States. And also, there are some features you're using in the United States that we don't use in the UK. So just to put that out there ahead of time so there's no confusion. But again, you're more than welcome to stay. Okay, so today I'm going to be doing an overview of the build that's required within the ITS report dictionary. My name is Kristen Jones, and I'm a Senior Application Specialist here at Meditech, and I will be demoing in the 6X platform, and I'm going to be in a UK standard ring, 607. And so what I'm going to be covering is how you essentially build your ITS reports or templates and the different fields that are required and how this will affect the initial build of your report as well as the output of your report. So I do have everybody on mute at the moment because I'm having difficulty figuring out how to take you off of mute, but you're more than welcome to send a question via chat because I am keeping an eye on that, and I will be more than happy to address anything that comes up as we go along. So I'm going to start here on my main menu, and I'm going to be accessing my ancillary applications, which will include ITS here at the top. I'm going to access my dictionary and P through Z to go to my report dictionary, because this is where the main chunk of our build is going to take place. So upon going into my report dictionary, I'm going to be prompted for the department that we're going to be using. However, once I'm in there, I'm able to actually change the department to the one I'd like to build my report, where I'd like it associated to. Because as you know, ITS is department driven, so you're going to want to make sure that you have your reports that you're building associated to the departments that you want to be using. So if you're signing in from a different department, you're not going to see the reports available if they're associated to a different department. So just to keep that in mind. And also in a situation where, for example, you're opening a task, it's always important to include the department because you could have a report named the same thing but associated to different departments. So the department I'm going to be using is IMG, which is our imaging department. And we have active, if you'd like this particular report to be active and usable in the system. We have the name of the report. So this is what's going to appear on our lookups and anywhere you're looking up this report to kind of give you an indication of what the report is. So you're going to want to name it accordingly and make it easily identifiable if you're going to make a selection and want to actually use this report. Down here in the status field, we have our final status. So this is essentially the status at which the report is considered final. So typically this would be set to signed. However, you do have a choice to include draft or signed. But as I said, typically you wouldn't want a report to be considered final until it actually reached its signed status. We then have the billing status. So this status is in reference to professional charges, which may be associated with the order that's linked to the report. And this is kind of the way charges would flow to bar based upon that setup with the order. The status controls when the professional charges will cross to the bar application. So this would be set to pending draft or signed. The default status can also be set to pending draft or signed, and this is the status the report will default to when entering a new report. So when you're choosing to start a report and you hit document, it's automatically going to pull in and save it a draft status unless you change it at that point. And oftentimes this will be set to a draft status. The health portal status. So this is the status at which you'd like the report to flow to the health portal. And typically you would want that set to signed, as you wouldn't want it available to a patient until it would have been reviewed by the attending consultant or whoever needed to make sure that the information was correct. The health portal delay hours. This gives you a little bit of leeway before the actual signed report will flow to the health portal. So for example, if you set this to 24, that would be 24 hours. So while that report is at a signed status and is ready to go to the health portal, the delay just gives a little bit of leeway in case there's something that actually needed to be changed on that report, rather than have it immediately flow and available for the patient. Next, the available for consultant documentation. And for any mainstream customers that are on the line, this field would say physician documentation in the US version of software. So this is just saying, can this report be used with TDoc, essentially. So you'll see when we get to the report sections how you can actually use this report for physician documentation or consultant documentation. The next, required dictated by at draft status. So this will determine whether or not users enter a provider name to file the report at a draft. So for example, you usually want a dictating provider required for reports at a signed status. Do you want to require dictating date and time? Again, yes, no field. Confidential. This is a yes, no field. And this is just determining to allow only EMR users with access to confidential information to be able to view this particular report. So it's basically just adding a flag letting them know it's confidential. So people that should not be viewing the report are not viewing it. I'm just going to answer a couple of questions. I think we may be having some problem with audio for some participants. Just want to confirm that. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep going until I get an answer just confirming that everybody can hear, because I know some of you can, at least. So let's keep moving on. So the next field is create report accession ID. So basically, the accession ID numbers will immediately create when the report is entered, and this is a yes/no field determining if that will be the case. If you enter no or leave this field blank, the system uses the value you entered in the ITS department dictionary instead. This field is only accessible if the create report accession ID parameter is enabled. And as we can see here, that is the case because I do have the ability to create a report accession ID. All right, think everybody can hear at the moment. The next field is the progress note field, and this is also a yes/no field. And this is basically determining if the report can be used as a progress note. For mainstream customers that are listening, this was created as part of a meaningful use enhancement. And what this does is it makes it so that DR can easily identify progress notes based upon what's flowing. Next, we have the EMR report identification. The name that you define here is the EMR name by which this entry is defined as an EMR. So basically, for a report you would be creating here in IPS, in this case, we would create it as a transcription report. The field that's very important is the one below, which is our EMR ID number. So this is going to determine when it flows to EMR, which panel it's going to go to, the name of the report. So you can see here, it's called radiology report. So that is what we would actually see in EMR when we go to take a look at this report. The next field, for these codes that are used, this field typically is not used, so it's not something I'm going to cover today, but if anybody wants a little bit more information on that, I would be happy to pass it along, but again, this field is not typically used. The next field, the nomenclature map, this is where you're going to map your clinical content. And you can see here, I actually don't have authorized use for this service here in the ring I'm in. So for those of you that are using the nomenclature mapping, you would do that here. Here at the bottom of my screen, you can see I have incomplete record reasons. For those of you that may or may not be using this has to do with determining when reports will be considered incomplete. And there's kind of a lot of setup to this within MRI, creating reasons and setting up statuses and whatnot. So we're not really going to get into that today. And I don't think most UK customers are actually using this functionality. But if anyone was interested, I could get more information and likely could do a whole session on the setup for this, and would be more than happy to do so for anyone that may want that. I haven't seen any questions come through, but I'm keeping an eye out if anyone has anything, so please feel free to send them along as I go. The next tab is our printing tab, which is here at the top. The first one we have is our final auto print. This is a yes/no field. And this is going to just determine, once the report hits its final status, do you want it to automatically print? The draft auto print on, as it indicates, it's just asking if you want the report at a draft status to automatically print. So here you can see I have CC defined. So what this is going to do, if I have CC here, the printer will automatically look to the destination tabs, which we'll get to in a moment. So any report that reaches its draft status is going to print based upon the printers defined here on this next tab we'll get to. But we'll get there in just a moment. Here we have our download to networked folders. Reports can be stored in a folder on a PC. You have to enter free text here to actually enter the path that will be used. And when this is defined, the folder will be fully shared with the entire network and available to everyone. The format field here, next to where you would actually define your path, you can determine the format of what's going to download, and you could do that in plain text, meta text, or Microsoft Word. So once those reports actually go to that subfolder, you can decide, or go to that folder, you can decide if you'd like them to be stored in subfolders within that main folder, just to make the reports more easily accessible or easy to locate. And here on the on status, this can be defined as draft or signed. And this is going to define the status at which these reports are actually going to download and take that path and go to the folder as they should. So here below in our additional copies to, I actually have the ability to add additional copies to. So let me just show you a couple of things where you can actually pull in these copies to. So for example, if I do an I space and an F9, I could quickly include insurance, look up to the different insurances that are available. I could also do, if I wanted to add a provider, we could do a D space and an F9, and it's going to pull me into the clinician or provider lookup. You could add those right here. So again, once you do this, the system will then look to the printers defined on the Destinations tab, and if the printers are not defined on the Destinations tab, they would look to the recipient dictionary, which in most cases, the recipient dictionary will not be set up just because of the intensive build to set up per provider or clinician. So typically, this would look to the Destinations tab, which we are actually moving on to. So here within the Destinations tab, this is going to determine for this report that we're building what status and where and for what patient types reports will print. So here at the top for the report status, you can determine if you would like the report to automatically print at draft, signed, or both. Here we have it set to both. Here below, we have the ability to set up printers based upon the fields here. So for example, I have department, and yes, I want it to print, and I have a specific printer where this report will print to every time it reaches a draft or a signed status based upon what we had defined above. If we did the dictating consultant, again, we have a fax default, but we don't have a printer defined. And also to point out, we have for medical records, we do not have default printers set here, but we do have it set that it will print for inpatients. So there's kind of a lot of flexibility within this printing function. And again, typically the printing would not be set up in the recipient's dictionary and would be done here on the Destinations tab. The next tab we're going to take a look at, which is the main place of our actual build of the report itself, is here within the report section. So this first field, the quick edit section number, this is looking to these sections below. So we do have two sections on this particular report. And what this is going to do is when I'm editing this report, this is the section that I'm going to automatically be taken to when I'm in edit mode. So here I have it set to section 1. So I'm going to want to go to the body of my report and make any edits that I need to. Just to make it a little easier and save a couple of clicks. The Meta header or footer document, this is going to determine what header and footer will be used on this particular report. We'll kind of jump into that dictionary in a little bit just to show you quickly what that looks like. We have here the template header or footer document, and this is the header and footer that will be used for physician documentation reports. They will not take on the same header as the ITS reports. However, you could use the same one, basically, but you would need to define it in both fields. We have the display section name. So on the output of your report, are you going to want the section name to display? And that would be looking here at these pieces. The label attribute, this is if you want to use fields or queries in the screen and form report sections to appear in one of the different styles. So I don't have any defined down here, so that's why I cannot get into this field. But if I did, you could use the font styles for Microsoft Word, Meta text document, and you could enter the font style is bold, italics, or underlined. So again, I would need to have that defined here in order to have access to that. The response attribute, if you want to field or query responses in the screen and form report sections, again, it would be the same. You'd be using Microsoft Word or the Metader text documents. And again, you could define bold, italic, or underlined. And that would be done here with these attributes. So here is where I'm going to define the pieces that are essentially going to make up my report itself. So here I have a name, body of the report, and the type of this particular one is going to be a text, because here's where I'm going to want to be able to free text any information on this particular report. So you can see here I do have some different options for what types of sections I would like added to my report. So the text would be, we have access to the Metader document edit screen and be able to add any text to our report. Some other options we have is we have Word, which would be our Microsoft Word. We have Screen, which is a CDS, where you could just pull in CDSs from MIS, which you'd like to have display on the report, which you could answer. We have Impressions. You can actually pull in the impressions into the report itself, which would be basically the general overview of what was found or the impression from the clinician. We have the form, which is going to be pulling from the ITS form dictionary. The image, which will pull from the MIS picture dictionary. If there was an image, for example, of a body or whatever your report applies to, a head, you could pull that right into your report. The picture, a little bit different from pulling from the MIS picture dictionary. Here you'd have the ability to pull in an actual picture in either BMP or JPEG format. And the last one, template, which I can show you right here. This is where you're going to determine if this particular report can be used in physician documentation. So here you can see I have the type defined as template, and now I have this field below. And what I can do here is this will look to physician documentation template lookup, and this is how I'm going to make the link between my ITS report and physician documentation. So once I've done that, and this is good to know. So I get a message saying this particular template is already associated to another report. This can be helpful if you know that you have a physician documentation report or template associated to report, but you've forgotten which one it is. This is kind of a quick way to get a little message to know exactly where it is you need to look, and you're in the right. I'm going to make my physician documentation report look to the headers and trailers that are defined here, and that's what we will see in physician documentation. So here, again, we have the type, and over in the screen, form, and print, and text, this is where we have the ability to pull in information based upon the type we have defined. So here, because I have a text type defined, I was able to automatically pull in text. But as you noticed, I was not able to pull in a form or a screen because that doesn't go with the text type. So here, if I had my screen type defined, I do a lookup here, now I'm going to be brought to my customer defined screen, and this is how I would associate it to my report. Here in the last field, you can determine if you would like those particular sections to be required. So what that's going to mean is when your user goes to actually create and then sign the report can never go to its final status until that section has been completed. I'm just going to check to see if there's any questions. Okay, I think we're good. All right, so here the bottom on draft, what this is going to do is to allow the section to appear on reports with a draft status. So if the report is at a draft status and you've actually completed one of these sections, do you want it to appear on a draft status report? Typically, this would be set to yes. And the on final, if you'd like the report section to appear on the final copy, then you would set this to yes, or otherwise leave no or blank. Also, this would typically be set to yes. Here in the new page field, this is determining if the report section should begin on a new page. You'd enter yes or no. So if you were in the middle of a section, do you want it to have to appear on one page and half the other page, or the entire thing move to the next page? And just to note, this field only applies to Microsoft Word reports as an option. And blank lines, here you would enter the number of blank lines you want to appear after the report section that you have highlighted. So this would give a little bit of space in between your sections to make your report look and present a little more clearer. Here, the last tab on our report section, the last field on our report section tab is addendum or edit. So we've got a couple of options here. We have A, E, or N. If you set this to A, this means you can add an addendum to the report. If it is set to E, you would actually edit the report and modify the text as opposed to actually adding an addendum. And N would be neither. And this works in conjunction with the Access Dictionary and the toolbox parameters. So if you did want to allow a user to actually make edits to a report where it would actually change the text and not add an addendum, you would need to set the access for that user as well as have that set up in the toolbox parameters. It's not typically something you would want to give access to all of your users. The report format field or tab is fairly self-explanatory. This is where you're going to set up your margins for your Microsoft Word and your Metator. You're going to determine if you would like labels to print or not, and that's here. We have, if this is set to yes in the label field, it'll display for all copies. If it's set to F, it's only going to display for final copies. If it's set to O, this is going to display on all copies other than the final. Or you could set this to N, which will not display the label at all. So here I want to display my labels. And underneath for each of the fields available, this is all free text. And this is where you're basically going to set your specific label descriptions for the report copy. And again, that's all free text. Here on the header footer font tab, on this tab, the MS Word header can be defined and the specific sections can be activated. So again, this is going to apply only to the Microsoft Word reports. So here I'm able to choose a file name, and then from there I can set everything up as I did with my actual Metator format. So again, when you're creating these reports, the setup is going to depend upon if you're using Microsoft Word reports or if you're choosing to use the Metator function. And again, we can set that all up here, how you would like everything to display on your Microsoft Word reports. Here at the bottom, you can display, determine your font and your font size, which is going to be your typical standard font sizes. However, here, if you look at the Metator font, you can see the size is 4, and that is just because the numbers for the Metator font don't match up with the standard one. However, there is a KB article talking about which ones match up. So for example, here I know offhand that a size 4 for my Metitor font is actually going to be equal to 11 in my standard Microsoft Word fonts that we're all familiar with. This last tab we're not really going to get into too much, but just to give you a general overview of what that's all about, is this is a UK enhancement that was created. And what this does is it creates audio, it's an audio file enhancement where there is a universal folder that's created and shared on a background job client. So what this is trying to do is kind of create a faster turnaround time by using these audio files. So here you can create turnaround hours, target flag hours, and basically this all applies to these audio files. At the moment, I don't believe we have any customers using this. However, we do have some testing and looking into it. So I would be more than happy to get anyone some more information on this. This is an enhancement. It's UKNRAD 91 and UKNRAD 95, if anyone's wanting to look into it. But again, if you would like more information, I would be happy to get that to you. Okay, just checking for questions, and I don't see that I've had any come in, but feel free to send them along should you. So that gets us through most of the fields just in general in the report dictionary. So I'm just going to jump quickly into the Metitor document dictionary because that's where our headers and footers are pulling from, to kind of show you what that looks like, to at least have you familiar with them. So here in our Metitor document dictionary right here in our A through O, I'm just going to take a quick look at the header and footer that we had associated to that report, well, for the ITS report, and just show you what that looks like. So just to quickly go through this, I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with creating these, but just going to give a quick overview to make you familiar with the fields and what they do. So again, we have active yes or no. We have the name of this particular header and footer that we have built. We just want to make it easy to identify when we're choosing to add it to a report and name it something that applies. We have a type. So there are a couple of, actually once you've entered the type, you can't actually change it. But the types that are available are headers, which is what we're looking at now, because that's what you're going to need to have it defined as. There's letter, which is when you would be creating letters for mammography, and that would apply to these fields down here, which I actually do not have access to because it's not a letter type of document. And the last one is other, which applies to our recall text. So because I do not have this defined as other, I can't not click into these fields and change them in the bottom right-hand corner here. So we're going to be mostly just covering the headers and footers anyhow. So here I have the margins, which will standardly pull in as 0.5. However, you can make any changes to those. And here in this bottom section, this is kind of the big piece of the build, and you can create a different Metitor and different fields pulling in for each of these different pieces. So I'm just going to tell you exactly what each piece refers to. So the first one is our page header. So I'll put a Y here in the edit field if I actually want to get into where I would go ahead and create what I want to include in the page header. So the page header would typically be the hospital logo, something that you're going to want to appear on the front copy with the hospital logo and the hospital address. Here I don't have one included, but that would be included here. I will show you a few of the other things that you could include. So just for those of you that aren't familiar, the F5 key is what will bring you to your get function. And this is where you're going to go ahead and add whatever you want to include in this piece. So here I've done my F5 to get to my F function. If I do an F, a space, and then F9, so again that's F space and F9, this is going to bring me to all the standard fields that are available for me to add to whatever it is I'm wanting to do. So for example, in this particular patient header, this is probably where I'm going to want to look up the hospital address or anything like that. So for example, I'm going to just choose hospital name. So now my field has pulled in. See, we can also do my F5 again. I'll do F space REP and then enter. This is going to bring me up to all the fields that I can include on the footers or the trailer of my report. So as you can see, this all has to do with signing. So I could choose any of these fields, and then this is going to automatically pull in that field. And again, these will only apply to the footers and trailers of your report, as they have to do with signing. We can do F5 again, Q space, F9, and this will bring us to our queries. And this can pull in any query automatically. We also have P space and F9, and this is going to bring me to fields that are available for my footers. So it's just giving me some choices of page numbers and how I want them to display. Do I want the total page count number and that? And again, that only is added to the trailers or footers and has to do with your page numbers. And the last one I was going to show is T space F9, and this is going to, oh, sorry. Try again. T. Well, maybe I don't have any text built, but I had thought I did. Let's try again. This will be able to allow us to pull in any can text, which I had done earlier, so I'm not sure why that's not working at the moment. But again, you could pull in any can text automatically. All right, I give up. Those are just some different functions that you can use. We have our standard Metitor functions here at the top, but one that I want to point out that's very important when it comes to building your headers and your trailers is this divide function. And what this is going to do is it's going to space out your headers like they should be spaced. So for example, I could do name, and then I would want to pull in the specific field, but I'm not going to do that right now. I hit divide, which is here, and you see how that moved over. I could do it again, hit divide again, and it's going to space everything out so that it looks nice. So what can happen is if you do not use the divide function when you're creating your headers and you choose to use tab or space to make everything look nice, it can tend to look good here when you're creating it, but it can cause problems when you're actually printing out the report. So if you do find you have some funky spacing issues going on, try to redo it and use the divide function, because that's a pretty easy way to resolve that issue. So those are just some of the basic functions that you can use for building here, but I just want to go through to show you what these other pieces mean. So again, for the page header, that's typically going to be where you'd have your hospital logo. The page 2 header, the page 2 header What this is going to do is it's going to be at the top of your second page and all of the pages that follow. So this is typically going to include the patient name, the account number, some way that it's easy to identify that patient should a page fall out. So again, that's going to be from page 2 and anything after. It shouldn't include a lot of information. It's just kind of a way to identify that paper. The patient header. The patient header, this is the information that's going to show on the first page under the page header, so underneath your hospital logo. And this is where most of your information on the patient is going to display. So there's going to be more information. It's not going to be just the account number and the name as we just saw with the page 2, but this is where you're going to want to include most of your information. The section header, this is the header that displays before each section. Typically this isn't really used, but it can be. The signature, this is going to be the signature information on the report. And you can see here, I have my signing information by having these standard data fields built and pulled in, and pulling in all the signing information. The addendum header, this is the header that's going to display when a report is in, this is the header that's going to display before you add your addendum. So typically it will be set to something like you see here. Just something kind of big with some indication that any text that's appearing underneath that is actually the addendum piece of the report. The addendum signature, this is where you would determine the fields that are going to be used when you're pulling in your addendum signatures. And here you can see here, I have the specific data fields used when an addendum is being signed, as opposed to the initial report. And the page footer, this is what we looked at earlier when we were looking at the meta-editor, and this is where you're going to determine your page numbers and how it's going to display. And as already mentioned here at the bottom, if this report or if this document was a letter type, I'd have the ability to define the text that's associated to that letter here at the bottom. So that's going to automatically pull in with this particular document. That's typically used with mammography. And here in the bottom right corner, which I already mentioned, if this type had been other, we'd have the ability to enable recall text on reports by associating this particular document. That was kind of just a general overview of how to build the report and how to add your headers and footers and all that. I know there's a lot more to it if you start looking into Microsoft Word and efficiencies and all that, which I'd be happy to cover if interested, but this was more of just an overview. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pass them along right now and I can address them. Or if you think of something afterwards, I could get back to you. My email is kjones@meditech.com. And again, my name is Kristen Jones, and my extension is 2631. If you think of anything after the fact, I would be happy to chat about it. It does not look like I have any questions, so I will just say thank you, and please feel free to get in touch with me if there's anything I can help with. Thank you.